Okay, good. So, so one of the biggest challenges, presenting on the Agile conference is that you never know who is the audience. Because, we have developers, managers, testers, many, many other people, Scrum Masters. So quick show of hands. How many of you are developers? Oh, wow, nice. How many of you are testers? How many of you consider yourself testers and developers? Oh, wow. Okay, that's good. How many of you are managers? Okay, also good. Scrum Masters? Those who are managers as well, so okay. Sometimes it's matter. Okay, so let's do it like this. So my talk might be a bit different to what you have heard about testing before. Maybe not, depending how much you know about testing. It will be kind of hard to explain everything in 1 hour because that's basically the aggregation of my work, not only my work, and basically my time at Spotify for the last 3 years. So that's something that I dedicated time to work on together with other engineers and managers together. And that somehow resulted in some other kind of use that I want to share with you and give you some inspiration and thoughts what you can do in your own company. So I don't know how many of you heard about Spotify as a product. So how many of you using Spotify? How many of you heard about it? Okay, so most of you, but for those of you who don't know what Spotify is, so Spotify is legal music streaming service. So if you would imagine, all your music you have in the MP3s that you sort of downloaded from torrents and elsewhere, so something like that, but it's legal. And when you use it, you can use it for free, and you can use it as a paid subscriber. So we have 100 million of those free users, and 40% of those, 100 million users, and 40% of those are paid subscribers nowadays. So that's, type of scale that we operate, and all our services has to be available 24/7 because, it's worldwide, used in 60 countries around the globe. From the engineering side, we have 100 teams distributed among 2 countries, 5 cities, which is US and Sweden. And the roughly one team consists of 9 people. So that means engineers, product managers, Agile coaches sometimes. So that's basically the context and type of scale we operate on. So what to start? I mean, when you want to talk about testing, you need to define what testing is. You need to understand what is test. There's so many confusion around testing in the industry. When different people mean different activities and different type of actions and different type of verifications or whatever, when they talk about testing. So I want to start with very simple definition of what test is. So test could be a noun, I'm not an expert in English. English is not my native language, but when I Google what test is, it shows you a couple of options. You can do it yourself as well, Google what test is. And one of those first definitions that you get in the, obvious context, that test could be a noun, like an artifact, or test, as a set of actions that you need to repeat in order to confirm does something work as intended. So if you apply this type of metaphor on the, software development, what tests could be, you can do, unit tests, integration tests, functional tests. What else? Acceptance test, UI test, performance test, load test, stress test, right? But basically, and you name it, test, wherever. But basically what you do, you define a set of actions which you want to repeat all over and over to confirm that something behaves as expected. So that's what you're trying to do. And you can define those verifications, how I call them, on different levels. And at Spotify, we do a lot of those type of verifications on different levels. This picture shows you an example of verifications on mobile client side only. So if you use Spotify on your phone, either the Android or iOS, so that's how we test Spotify mobile client. And we have a set of different verifications, on different stages. So test those verifications not necessarily has to be run, in production or when build is finished and you have a stable release. So we run those checks, those verifications as early as we can. Even during the development, when you have, when you do implementation, you want to confirm that you didn't break anything as a developer, right? Because you constantly change different parts of your system and you interact with different dependencies. So you want to be sure actually that you didn't break anything, right? So you want to find regression as early as possible, right? So you want to start testing to find this regression as early as you can, so that you start as early as possible in the development. Then you do some, I know if you use GitHub, you're familiar with the GitHub workflow. So you do a pull request, and then in that pull request, you also want to run those tests to confirm that you didn't break anything yet when you, push it to master, when you merge some other changes with someone else, when you squash commits or whatever else you did. So you still want to confirm that nothing is broken. So when you merge your changes, again, you want to run more tests. And then, and also, sometimes it's very expensive to run some type of tests early on. So you want to run, you want to be smart how to run those tests. Some tests you want to be run, like unit tests, they're quite fast. They don't have much dependency. So you want to run those tests as early as possible because use them as a quick feedback loop. Some tests which implement on the UI level, and if they still have a backend dependency, which might take infinite time to run all those, you want to minimize an amount of time of waiting. Don't want to go for coffee every time you run the build, right? You want to sit and do your productive work. So you have to be smart when you divide those. Tests, so you run them on a time which gives you the most benefit. So you don't wait, you keep productive and you verify the work. So having those tests is very important, and there's so many conversations in the industry about what type of tests I should write, what are the good tests, what are the bad tests, As a developer also you find yourself, should I write, this UI test, or should I write integration tests? Why is it not possible to write integration tests? And, which type of, is there too many conversations about which type of test should we have? And we also had a lot of those conversations before. When you start this conversation in one team, then you realize, okay, there's another conversation in another team. And when I work with multiple teams, so when I jump from one team to another, I understand, okay, so that sounds the same conversation we already had in another team. Okay, can we just reuse what you guys described, and use it in some other context? Sometimes it works like that. So for those type of, conversations, we have a separate type of one-day meeting. We call it unconference. How many of you have been a part of any unconferences before? So just Google for it, what is unconference? There's plenty, pages describing the format. But what we found is this format is very easy to facilitate the conversations about something which hurt many different teams. So that's format that we found which is easy to communicate and resolve those inconsistencies and find some common way, something we can actually agree. So basically, on conferences, it's a good practice, sort of, in our context, to find the way how we can agree on something. And we use those conferences a lot when we want to, just discuss a problem. Sometimes it might be hard for you to find out, okay, which type of test should I use in my system? But just realizing it is a problem might be enough for you. And then inside your team, you will be spending time understanding, okay, we need unit tests, or we need integration tests, or we need any other type of test. So also what we did, we tried to experiment with we borrowed this model from Google, and they made this type of initiative where you take a team and you try to make a small assessment to that team on which level are they in a given time in terms of test automation practices. And for example, the first level could be this team need to have continuous integration system in place. That would be enough for them. For the second, and also they have to define which test types they have. For the second step in this ladder, they should also add unit tests to every feature they produce and every pull request they make. And this comes not like as a requirement that they have to do this, but mostly as a suggestion that if you want to improve your quality and your productivity, so that's something you need to discuss in your team. But those are not set in stone rules that you have to have coverage like 80%, otherwise nobody accepts your features. So it's not like that. We're not a regulated environment until we come to IPO, so let's see what happens. But you have to come to the conclusion, to the agreement that, okay, what type of practices we want to have, what type of quality we want to build in our system. So what type of, and then use this framework or certification framework, which gives tool for teams to have those conversations together and find what is the way of working which suits them for the better, for what type of tests they need and what type of deployment they need, and so on and so forth. So, and when you start those conversations, so they come quite hard. When you work as a coach with the team and you start having those conversations, what type of tests we need, who's responsible for testing. Hey, we have testers and we have different developers, back and front end, data engineers and stuff like that. And then there comes a question, okay, but who will be responsible for the end work? So when some bug happens, when the user reports this issue, who should take care of it? Who should act? And because you don't want to finger point and blame people like, hey, it's testers, they didn't find this bug, or like, that's a backend developer, he introduces this bug, or that's build engineer, he didn't build software properly. So when you talk about quality, it's not about blaming game. So quality, at least for us in our companies, we see quality as the team sport. So quality is something that everybody owns and everybody contributes to. Even if you have people who call themselves QAs, like quality assurance historically, right? But they don't mean QA is quality assurance. They mean QA is quality assistance. So that's a fundamental difference. So when you see a person who comes to you, let's say if you're a developer like daily, right? And you have a person coming to you asking the question, hey, developer, how can I help you to be better? What type of help you need? I can give you my time. I can dedicate my time for you so you be better. And that could mean I can build a tool for you. You want to test interaction between database and some blah, blah, blah web service. And you say, I come to and say, what do you need from me? So you say, hey, I need this tool which I can mock this database, I can test this web service in isolation. So, okay, fine. Which database are you using? Cassandra. All right. I know a tool called Cassandra Unit. So here is a tool you can use. It's open source. You can easily test, write those tests, like checks, for your service and verify its correctness. And I will help you to guide you through this learning curve until you say, okay, I feel confident writing those checks. I will do it myself. So I do this proof of concept, all this hard work to get you started. So that's basically what I do. And then, writing those checks and tests become a part of the routine. And implementing those checks is a part of your software implementation. I've been working for some other companies before where we had like a separate, quality, like QA department, or separate test engineering department, like testing department. We had like 100 testers in that department. And we had a problem where, when you start a project or product, wherever, you have a small amount of work, right? So you need to verify a new feature works. So what happens after? You release a new version, then you have to verify that nothing else broke. So you do regression, testing to find regression. And then your time comes, your product grows inside. And then what I found all those 100 testers doing is verifying that all features still work because the product is so big. And what they've been doing, they've been writing those test cases, right, on the only UI layer because nobody knew how the system has to actually work because testers, we are not quite technical, we don't know programming, we don't know how everything works, we just verifying that everything works in the UI. Which could be enough for some cases, but in most cases, it just means that testers do meaningless work because if you do web services, testing UI is not enough. So what I come with is, what I'm saying is that working on, on test automation is a part of implementation. Verification of correctness. So what I mean by test automation is verification of correctness that software or product works as you expect it to work. So if you want to use another metaphor, it's like if you imagine that you build a house, right? Like very tall building. We build a small one, maybe you don't need much test, just wrap it up and then ship it. But if you build a big house, you might need to add some additional support for it. You might add some additional scaffolding around your product so you can get a quick access to any window. If something goes broken, you can just quickly go inside and go and find what the root cause is and fix it. So see your automated tests, your checks in the same way. See it as a scaffolding for your system. It's a supporting tool which helps you to understand what's going wrong with your system, how you can fix it before your users saw it, before testers saw it. And the faster you do those, the easier it would be to, not to run into problems that you, run out of time, or you don't have time to implement any other features because you have 20 to 200 bugs in your list you need to fix. So you minimize this amount of time you spend on reworking something because you catch those issues early on in the process. So those test automation, what I mean is automated verification. So those are checks which helps you to prevent major issues from happening. So that's something similar about like a monitoring. The problem comes when you as a developer start implementing, like your development team, if you're a manager, you come from the conference and hear, hey, okay, everybody does test automation. Netflix does it, Google does it, Spotify does it, Facebook does it, who else, wherever. Everybody does test automation, so let's do test automation as well. And so here comes a problem. I guess many of you have seen this pyramid before, like test automation pyramid. So the most problems that I've seen in my previous life is like taking those 100 testers department in example. So when those testers start to automate their work, they have no idea how system work under, this unit test, integration test under like the implementation layer. They only know on the top. They know how system looks like, so they start automating their work based on their knowledge. And you get a pyramid reversed, right? So you get many UI tests on the top and no unit tests at the bottom because nobody wrote unit tests, only UI tests. And you get many, many other problems with this approach, and Spotify still have similar problem as well, where our pyramid looks like this. It's like a sun clock, where we have UI tests and let's add some integration unit tests. Okay, we did those. Okay, what's in the middle? Like nothing. So now we're trying to fix that problem. But I mean, the main challenge for this is to understand your architectural concern. So if you want to build the correct pyramid like this, so that in some cases would require you to redefine your software architecture, meaning you have to rewrite your product from scratch. You don't want to do that, obviously, because your product making money, so that's not on the conversation to throw it away and start everything from scratch. That's not the topic. The topic is how you find a way to maintain what is running right now, but keep refactoring, code optimization, what we heard, but keep refactoring the system so it's testable. So it can be tested, so it becomes testable. The lower, the better. Why? Because those tests are easier and faster to execute. And you can execute them earlier in the development process. You don't need to wait until the whole system is built, all the components fit together, and then you run end-to-end tests, which last 48 hours, and then you pray and go to church. It's the same like, Statoil estimation, which somebody told us. In order for that not to happen, you need to do work in small chunks. And that is challenging from development point of view because you need to find a way how you can test your components in isolation from each other. And there is not enough tools in open source world yet to test everything. You need to build tools yourself. It takes time, you know. Sometimes you need to learn how this technology works deeply so you can mock it properly around. You know, so that requires you to force your knowledge because there is nobody have even done that before you. Just to give an example, we've been working with the Hadoop pipeline, and then Docker came in and said, hey, Docker, you know, Docker is container technology. And we've been sitting together, okay, how we will be testing it? You know, we had this data processing pipelines, we had like multiple XML files on one side, we've been doing Spotify video back in those days. And you can play video on Spotify, by the way, if you didn't know. So you have a lot of XML files, and then you do the data processing to normalize, merge, link all this data, and put it in the data set, in the database. And we said, okay, the only way to test it was you spin up all those environment in your cloud or in your production-like data center. That takes, you know, hour, two, until you spin up all the components. With help of Docker, when we Dockerize the Hadoop pipeline, and we run our tests in Docker, that took us, I don't know, 20 seconds? You know, 1 hour instead of 20 seconds. But we had to implement this, you know, Hadoop Docker container ourselves. So we had to dedicate a time for it. You know, that's part of this architectural decision you need to make in order to achieve better testability. And this doesn't come from testers. You know, this comes from you as a developer, because you know how systems work. That's for you to implement. And this tool is test automation. It's also your tool. It's not testers' tool. Testers can do something else, I will tell you. Test automation is only for developers, but don't call it test automation, call it automated verification. That will simplify your life. Why simplify your life? Because testers won't be saying that, you know, testing is ours, not yours. If you call it differently, you can, you know, play with the argument. But also, what is very important, if you start working with those automated verifications, it's not enough to only look on your architecture. You also need to look in your infrastructure. As you run your tests, as you write your tests, you start running them. The more you run, the more tests you write, the more test runs you get. So you have to invest heavily into the infrastructure on how to execute those tests, how to work with test results, how to work with flaky tests. They can fail sometimes because of data or because of network issues or I don't know, environment inconsistencies. There are many different reasons. So you have to invest constantly in the infrastructure to maintain all your automated verifications. And those are also software development. You can use some open source tools like Elasticsearch, Kibana for fancy dashboards, you know, and stuff. But you also use, you know, Angular and build those crude application in fancy UI yourself. So why you limit yourself? No limits. Use open source technologies and do whatever you want. Just solve your problem as they grow. You know, you didn't work with test automation. It was tester's job. Now it might become your job. And for you, it's much easier to solve this problem as you know how to design system. Testers mostly don't. They use Selenium, they use, you know, SOAP UI, what else, QTP, and those tools, you know, they design in, you know, I call it testing in past century, like 90s, 80s. So if you want to do modern software development, you own the full stack end to end. And then if you don't have a tool, you just build it. Why you buy those, you know, if you have testers, why you buy those QTP test complete or, you know, SOAP UI? Why do you buy even those? I will tell you why. Because you're afraid coding, you're afraid programming. That's why you buy it. There is nothing wrong with coding or programming. It's easy. There's plenty Udacity and other educational courses how to start coding. You have lots of developers in your companies who can help you with that. Stop paying money for vendors, unless you work in a regulated environment. Sure, there are might be some limitations. I understand. Even though you can build your own software which regulates with those limitations and without buying SOAP UI, which also requires certification and some other stuff, which also a pain in the ass. So make life simpler. But my talk is a bit about difference. So those are requirements you know, to build a basement for your house. Like automated verifications, those are like fundamentals. But what I want to talk with you about is more about what else test can be. Right? So we talk about test as a noun, as a set of those artifacts, those verifications that you can easily automate and execute automatically, either on UI or API or integration unit level. The lower, the better. But then you come to the question, okay, so if test automation is a developer work, and all those functional test cases the tests are been executing or during regression testing, now it's totally or almost everything is automated, what tester will be doing then? Do we need testers at all? And people are discussing those topics over, over the earth nowadays. They say, hey, do we actually need testers? What are they doing? What does the value tester bring to the team? I will tell you the following. So there is a value in what testers do, but you need to understand what else testing can be. And testing also could be an action, not only verification of expected and actual results. But testing also can be an exploration. Testing also could be an experimentation, an analysis. So that's what professional testers do for a living. They explore system for issues, inconsistencies, and defects. And that type of testing requires you to know technology on the same level as a developer. It requires you to know your project context the same as a project manager. It requires you to know how to work with risks. So being a professional tester is much harder, in some contexts, it's much harder than being a programmer or project manager, because there is bigger type of complexity and more dimensions that you need to choose from. But in order to understand that, you need to see, you need to change the paradigm of thinking. You need to stop thinking that testing is simply verification, actual expected results. So testing is looking for unexpected. Testing is understanding what your system actually doing, how it actually works. So that's basically exploring. So if you see how your users start using your system, how they register the first time, how they navigate which part of your app. So they basically explore. They explore how to use your product. So that's the type of testing I'm talking about. And we do a lot of those test sessions, what we call test sessions. So we have, sometimes we even have the whole company testing a big release. And there is no kind of limitation what type of testing they do. There are no predefined set of test cases to verify. So there might be some focus areas, like we introducing video to our product. So let's test everything around video. And we have VP of engineering, we have coaches, we have developers, testers, designers, engineering managers, and many, many others. So those not only testers, those are company employees, wherever role they are. I mean, you might say, yeah, Spotify is a fancy product, everybody wants to test it, but I mean, it's the same you can do for your products as well. If you work in some kind of military service, just something came to my mind. You can do some kind of mock server and try to imagine yourself being this military officer, operator, talk to that officer and try to execute end scenarios on behalf of that user. So try to be in his shoes. There are some books about that, like psychological development, about how to be in some other shoes so you understand people better. So that actually helps you to be a better person because you understand more people. And that is part of your job, not only as a tester, but as a developer as well. Because if you know how your user uses this product for solving his daily problems, you become a better developer. You know more context. You have a better argument on the meeting because you know how the product actually used at the end. And there are plenty of different ways how to manage testing around test sessions, not around test cases. So there are plenty of examples how you can manage your testing activities when they are activities, when they are test sessions. So for example, we don't have any manual test cases at all at Spotify, 0. we have checklists, or we call them tours, or guidelines sometimes, but we don't have test cases for manual execution. If we have a test case, they are automated. So we don't need humans to execute those boring, repetitive actions. Those are for machines. Because humans are more expensive than machines at the end. Right? Machines are cheap. So that's some examples about, when you start thinking about testing in a verb context, and you also come to the conclusion, okay, so how test automation else could be? And people often ask those questions, okay, so what do you mean? So if what we did before is not test automation, what is test automation then? And some people come with the crazy ideas, okay, so test automation, if you talk about automating the activity of exploration, so test automation then could be a Skynet, it's like robot testing itself. And you say, okay, yeah, there are some attempts to try to do that. If you Google how King uses AI to test in, this bubble game when you connect, those things, and how Candy Crush. So they made a presentation a couple of months ago of how they record user interactions and then use those interactions to sort of guide their test automation. So sort of using Skynet in limited context. At Spotify, we do model-based testing. So we use a graph walker, which is open source tool. You can Google for it. Graph walker, like walking on the graph. So we build a model of some use case, and then we put this graph walker tool, which is basically a set of algorithms which generate the sequences inside of this state chart diagram. And you build test cases based on that models that you prepared. So to some extent, we try to automate by using more tools. And in this context, what test automation could be as well is that any tools that you use which support your testing could be automation as well. It's, for example, if you imagine Selenium IDE, this browser, like plug into the browser which record and play your actions, what you did. So what you potentially could do, you can record some actions and then change the data so you can log in with different input parameters. So that would be test automation as well in this context where testing is an activity. So you won't be testing manually, but you won't be testing automatically in either. So you'll be half automated, half manual because you're still changing some inputs manually in the parameter. Then you might say, okay, so I can randomize the input creation. And then you say, yeah, everything is test automated in sort of Skynet world. But then it's limited. Still it's limited because you predefine a set of actions. And those set of actions doesn't change because machine can't make decisions on itself. It needs human to help with making decisions. So ideal test automation is not possible yet until you have this fancy AI world. But you can use the power of algorithms and the power of tools to find more issues and save your time as an engineer to focus on new interesting problems what you can find instead of just clicking and verifying that everything goes fine. So use your brain, that's what I'm talking about when you test. And that is much harder than clicking around. So why coaching in testing, right? So why do we need this? And why did I work on it? So what I found out when I was reading about this Agile manifesto and Scrums and SAFe and other frameworks, not many frameworks and those process frameworks, not many are talking about testers' role in that team. Oh, excuse me. Trying to find out how that would work. I can do it like this. No worries. That's okay. That's fine. I can do it like that. So the problem is the tester's role is somewhat undefined. Even if you open the Agile manifesto and see the people who sign it, who've been part of it, you won't find any. I mean, you find some people who are somewhat connected to testing, but you won't find people like James Bach, Michael Bolton, who are nowadays a rising star of testing, whose opinions matter. And when I talked to James, he said, like, yeah, I missed that meeting. Shame on me. I regret my entire life that I missed that Agile Manifesto meeting. But I mean, what nowadays is coming, so testing was somewhat forgotten when people signed and defined Manifesto. And now it's time for testers to sort of, stand on their own and redefine themselves. And that is happening. Slowly but surely it's happening. Well, yeah, you can Google for it, like different, like redefining testers roles. There are plenty of articles written about that already. But what I'm talking, you can start do it in your organization. So the first thing that you need your people to understand is there is a difference between checking and testing, because checking is very, very limited. So checking, what I mean by checking again, it's a predefined set of actions, right? So what can be automated, that is checking. What can't be automated, that is testing. Because testing, unless we have Skynet, is not possible to automate. And so the recipe for success, like success in some context, some definition, is quite simple. So you help teams to distinguish what checking, what testing is. Then you say, automate what is checking, all this routine which you do every release, automate it entirely, and then focus all your effort on discovering issues, on exploring how your product actually works. And so when you do this a lot, I wish you have fun and you can come up to me with more questions. Thank you.
Okay, now time for questions. I believe everybody has a lot to ask.
There was one hand.
What about, okay, Spotify is the product when a lot of software in there, but there's a lot of software products where working on machines and working with, for example, computers, cash machines, and so on, so on, so on. We need people that to put, for example, coin, yes, and you can't automate that. So what you should do with that?
Yeah, so there are certain, I will repeat the question. So there are certain limitations to the system which require, human interaction, like, putting a coin into the vending machine, for example. Or I've been working on one of the projects before when we had, how is that called? Cash register, when you have this paper rolling, when you buy something, then you have a check and then paper rolling. I will skip Spotify example, we'll come back to this, cashier example. So we had a check, this automated check running, and it was flaky from time to time, like failing. And it was failing like maybe 5 times or so. And then I said, hey, does somebody know why this test is always failing? And somebody said, oh, yeah, sure, I need to change a paper. Because test was using the real cashier, and it just ran out of paper, and test was always failing until we replaced the paper. And then it started passing again until paper run out of, run out of paper again. So what we did to fix that, we built our own, like sort of a driver, our own mock, which emulate the behavior of that cashier, but in software, not in hardware. So we didn't verify how the hardware component worked, but we verified that our service which integrates with hardware works properly. But then we added one more, system end-to-end test before the release to make sure that the whole system end-to-end worked. But on the regular basis, when we develop our product, with regular release cadence, we didn't verify it on the UI. We just verified it using this mock that we built. In Spotify context, there is certain limitation on testing using these hardware speakers. So, there are so many Sony, Samsung, plenty of different speakers around. And at Spotify, you can share music play to those speakers in your car, even using CarPlay, using Spotify Connect over those speakers. And the problem which comes with this approach that you need to test integration with all those hardware providers. And you would expect to have some software mock from them, but it's not necessarily the case. So that means we have, you want to rely and trust your partners that they test integration with you, which they not necessarily do all the time. But if something happens, some bug happens during the playback from your phone to the speaker over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, user complains about Spotify. Hey, Spotify doesn't work on my, blah, 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 Sonos speaker or whatever. And they say, okay, but the problem is not on our side, it's on Sonos side. Okay, I don't care. I mean, it doesn't work. For user, I understand. For you as a user, doesn't matter. So for those cases, we do certification on our side. So we have maybe 100 different speakers, and we hire students to come and verify that using test cases that actually. So there are some limitations to this approach, surely, on the hardware side. They are possible to be solved with help of those, mock analogy. But when you have partners, you need to have this. You need to build those relationships. So we're having conversation with different, those hardware providers. So we establish some kind of a process how we test it in a unified way, but that is still a journey for us.
We have one there.
Thank you for a nice presentation. My question will be connected to a video, Spotify engineering culture, which I find very interesting and which gives some insight how Spotify is using not just Agile, but evolving Agile and using their own engineering culture. And connected to this, there will be two parts of the question. One, do you still using this? And if it's proof to be worth having? And another question, another part is where testing fits to this engineering culture. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you thank you. So the first question was regarding the engineering culture and does it work as it's written and does it still work as it's written? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, but because Spotify is a company which is constantly growing, in size. So when you're seeing those squads and tribes, I guess it's the last scene what you saw, that still work like that, but also we have alliances. It's like tribe of tribes. So basically, bigger teams, more people, you need to manage it on the organizational scale a bit differently. So if speaking about the whole process, what you've seen on the engineering culture, part 1 and part 2, so that depends on which team you are. So there are some teams which work as it's written even better. In some teams, might be not. So that's why we have this test certification program to help them improve. And improve the ladder. So there are some teams who like level 4, some teams level 1, some teams level 0 because they don't have time, what they say. But I mean, that doesn't mean they're bad people. Yeah, so the culture is there, but I mean, the processes and tools might be different from team to team. So that's the distinguish between culture and tools, like following the Agile manifesto as well, what they say. So the second question was, I know, is that answered the first question? Okay. And the second question was regarding how testing fits into that picture. So that's also, one of those parts, what I said, that testing is not represented in the Agile community, therefore there is not much testing mentioned in those pictures, in those presentations. So to some extent it was from the test automation perspective. So there was like a feature flags. I mean, there was explanation of the infrastructure, like feature flags, for example. When you can use those feature flags in your testing, so you can turn off or turn on the feature and test integration in between different flags. So that culture doesn't necessarily explain how testing is done. So that's why I'm here to explain how testing is done. And I've done some other presentations before. So that's sort of my mission to show some light on how testing is done internally. But that picture not necessarily representing what testing actually is at Spotify. So that's actually sort of hidden. Where we see testing a bit different how some other companies might have seen it, might still see it. You should make third part? Sorry? You should make third part? Well, so that's my challenge. I mean, I try to, because I didn't know which type of granularity of how much information should I present, not to work out with all the details. I have lots of material on my laptop, on my head, so you can just grab me over beer. You can discuss some use cases and some specific situations we had and how we found many bugs. I have a chart which shows how many bugs we found over time when we've been testing, which actually proves which you stop finding bugs when you stop testing. We had an example. We had a chart which go up, up, and up, and management was saying, "Hey, why are we getting so many bugs?" I said, "Yeah, because we're testing." It's like, well, you want us to stop testing? Okay, you will stop getting bugs, you know. And we had a chart which is like going like up, up, and up. But then we put a clarification. We said that, okay, so up until this point, we stop rising like very low priority bugs. We only clarify very critical, like we call them P1, P2s, like in priority order. And then we polished our product. And we also stopped delivering new features, basically. So we said, let's do polishing, right? So when we polish it, and we said, okay, now we make this big release ready to do. But that was only for big redesign. So we made very big release for that. For smaller releases, the process is more or less streamlined. So when you need to deliver a small feature, so that basically goes quite easy. So you have a couple of test sessions, which tester does 2 or 3 test sessions before that goes live. But you don't release it to 100% at a time. You release it gradually over time. So like 1% of users, 2%, 3%, and you can manage the load and buy more servers, use auto-scaling, or turn it off if something doesn't work. We had an example where we've been launching the Spotify video feature, and we've been measuring those metrics from production where we've seen that video stopped working for Samsung Galaxy S4, just doesn't work. And then we opened that device and we said, hey, it actually works, but it didn't work on specific Android version of that Samsung Galaxy S4. So we've been looking around the office who has that version of Android installed, because you can't downgrade. You need to sort of get it pre-installed already. Then you have to reproduce that bug, and then when we reproduce that bug, we said, okay, we turn off video for that use case until we fix it, only for that device. And then we turn it on when we fix it. But the fix was not on our side, the fix was on the Google side, where they needed to fix the media codec to work on that specific device, on that Android version. So testing could be tricky and complicated, so it requires a lot of preparation infrastructure work. So that's what you need to do. But yeah, just grab me after we can talk about details. Huh? Okay.
Okay, so...
One more? Or... Do you still releasing bugs? Well, we still do. I mean, there are bugs in the product. I mean, the question is how urgent they are. So if the bug is a crucial one, you can't log in or you can't stream music at all. That somebody will be waking up in 1 second. Because there is a rotation. The people who work in the teams who maintain those services, those parts of the clients, they are the part of this pager duty rotation. What the pager duty is? It's like, from those times when you have pagers, boom, 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 wake up. So now there is a software for that, which sort of installed on your phone, and your phone will wake you up when your user will have a major incident. So there is a third-party company called PagerDuty. We use those a lot. And basically, if there's a crucial bug, somebody will be woken up and fix it for you. Not only for you, but mostly for, depending how big the issue is. Might be for 1 million users, might be for 10 million users. But if the issue is, I don't know, you don't like a color, for example, or, I mean, if it's only you, it might be not a problem. But if 60 million users doesn't like a color, that's a big problem. Then you need to fix. So everything depends on the priority order. So if the issue is top prior, then it will be fixed as soon as possible. If the issue is very low, then might take time.
And by the way, I have a question. You mentioned a lot of keywords, a lot of infrastructure, servers, and so on and so on. How you maintain this? Like how it's like, when one team is using their own technologies, another team is investigating new technologies, third team is like using the old technologies, and
yeah, it's
especially
a zoo. It's a zoo, yeah.
Like, and let's say, especially when you switch a team and they're using like technologies you never saw before.
Yeah,
so
I think the presentation was about uncertainty. I like uncertainty. I mean, that's a part of my life. I've been uncertain when I come to this conference even. When Donata asked me, when you come, I said, I have no idea. I mean, I can be in Kyiv, I can be in Stockholm, I can be in New York. I just buy a ticket and fly over. So for me, uncertainty is fine, and then you have to accept it. The only question is how you deal with this. And that's to find a way to fix this uncertainty and make it more kind of predictive. That's a good thing. Regarding your question about the regarding your question about the infrastructure, so that's where Spotify invested a lot. So there was a time when Spotify understood that we have the zoo technologies on different teams, and everybody works with different technical stacks. So that slows us down. When we need to release a cross-functional feature, that takes time for people to agree and maintain their own parts. So Spotify dedicated time and resources in terms of people and servers and time and everything. Resources, not in terms of people only, because we don't see people as resources. So what Spotify did, Spotify had a big infrastructure team called Infrastructure and IO, Infrastructure and Operations. And that team maintains, library for working with Cassandra, a library for building backend service, a library for Hadoop, library for writing tests, library for creating test users, library, you name it. Basically, anything you need, you have a separate team who provides you that tool. So you as a developer who works on the feature team, you're using this outside of the box. So basically, as you have any open source tool, so that's the same, but internally inside of the company. But that didn't happen we just need it. So that was because everybody needs that, and they sort of requested that tool from the infrastructure team, and that team was building tool for internal needs, and then also maybe open source. So there are plenty of open source tools. The Spotify open sourced, like Luigi is very quite popular, and also Helios framework. Helios is orchestrating Docker containers, and I use it a lot for integration testing, where you can spin up the container in your own local machine and then send requests to it without bothering cloud environment. So there are plenty of tools which open source. If you go to just Google Spotify open source, you will find a page. And there are plenty of people who work in that. So very quite similar model, like I guess many product companies do nowadays.
But you don't experience this problem when, let's say, teams using the different technologies and people switching between teams, and they need to learn new technologies?
You just learn. I mean, you learn. Yeah, your learning is a part of your job. You just learn. You have to accept that you need to learn every day. And
that's what I call culture.
It's a part of the culture, yeah, exactly.
So who has the last question, maybe? Everybody looks sleepy. Come on, guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're standing in the middle between the after party and beer, so let's cancel. Let's stop here.
Okay, that means if no questions, I have the last thing to do, to give you the small present from Agile Lithuania, and big thanks to you that you came to us and